Today is Monday, August 18th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Antros. A Christian university just scored a major victory against the government. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. You know the drill. Subscribe, leave a rating if you haven't done so already. We'd appreciate that. You can email us as well, right to our inbox, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're getting through the news of the day here each and every weekday night, bright and early. We're at it. Joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell, back from vacation. On the focus story, Billy, as I mentioned at the top, Grand Canyon University just had a big win.
Yeah, this is huge, and it ends their ongoing legal battle with the federal government. We'll get into all the details on that.
All right, looking forward to that coming up here in just a moment. On the main thing, when floods swept through central Texas on the 4th of July, the damage was immediate, but the needs didn't end there when the waters receded. Long after the headlines fade, families are still struggling to rebuild. Today, we're going to hear how the Salvation Army is stepping in to help. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. You can find the links to those in the description of this podcast episode. And make sure you subscribe to our new Substack, faithwire.substack.com. We are growing a community of believers over there. Our goal there is to pray through the news of the day. You're going to get prayer points multiple times throughout the week, and we're going to pray through those together. So make sure you're there at faithwire.substack.com. And with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And President Zelensky has drawn the line on land concessions as Ukraine's president now says Kyiv will not surrender territory that Russian troops have failed to capture, rejecting Vladimir Putin's demand to hand over the entire Donetsk region. Speaking in Brussels before his meeting with President Trump, Zelensky said peace talks can only begin along the current front line, stressing Ukraine's constitution forbids trading away land. Putin wants Ukraine to withdraw completely from Donetsk and neighboring Luhansk as condition to end the war, but Kyiv still controls key cities despite years of fighting. European leaders are backing Zelensky, warning Trump not to endorse any settlement that rewards Russian aggression. Ukraine's also pressing the US and Europe for concrete security guarantees, promises that Russia won't invade again, though Putin has rejected anything resembling NATO membership. And three Floridians were tragically killed when a truck driver made an illegal U-turn on a Florida interstate, pulling across lanes in a maneuver meant only for emergency vehicles. The victim's minivan slammed into the truck at full speed, killing everyone inside, and authorities revealed that trucker is an illegal immigrant who first entered the U.S. in 2018 illegally in California, and despite that, still got his CDL. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories on cbnnews.com. And Billy, this story, I saw the video on this, and that just shocked me. I don't know if you've seen the video of this maneuver this guy did. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. He just, with an 18-wheeler, just from the right lane on what looks like a highway, just turns left. You know, where there's the brake and the guardrails, and it's just it says no U-turns, only the emergency vehicles and police are supposed to use that. He just pulls from the right lane right across the interstate into the left, and a minivan just slams right into him because they cut right in front of him while they're probably going, 60, 70 miles an hour. Just inexplicable. And then you watch the video and the guy just looks emotionless, just standing there. And it's just tragic to see this. And, make whatever statement you want to make on it with the illegal alien part of it. It's horrible either way, but this just makes it worse. And the fact that California gave this guy a commercial driver's license as an illegal alien, it's upside down world.
Yeah, well, it is upside down world. And the fact that people have been able to get benefits of citizenry without being citizens, right? That is obviously the tragedy itself is horrific on its own merits, but then you have this other piece of the puzzle that people are able to go and get a license and do these things. If he wasn't able to do that, maybe this event wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if there was, proper training, if there, I don't know. I mean, I don't know all the details of this, but the point is we have to have laws and we have them for a reason. And when they're not followed, there are consequences to that. And sadly, this is one of them.
And I saw somebody say maybe this families who have lost these loved ones should sue the state of California. And listen, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a legal expert, but that certainly seems like they may have some grounds there. If they let an illegal immigrant get a commercial driver's license, and then this happens, it's just horrific. And obviously that's not going to bring their family members back, but we'll see what happens here in the coming days and weeks as this story continues to unfold. But this issue just is not going away. It does seem to be one that we continue to see stories like this, and things need to be done on the border. And President Trump has been making that a big issue and been doing that since he took office earlier this year. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And Grand Canyon University is once again declaring victory. So tell me about the latest here on this one.
Yeah, this has been a wild story to cover. We've been covering it for a few years now because Grand Canyon, and for those who don't know, this is a Christian college out in Phoenix, Arizona. It has been locked in a legal battle with the federal government now since at least 2023. So this has been going on for a couple of years, but a few months back, you may remember the U.S. Department of Education dropped a historic fine that it had levied against Grand Canyon. Now, in a new victory, a separate lawsuit from the Federal Trade Commission was dropped. And so this is a big deal because it signals, from what we understand, the end of the federal legal battle with Grand Canyon, this stalemate, this back and forth that has been going on for quite a while now. This will come to an end. And just so people understand, the FTC sued Grand Canyon University in late 2023. They alleged that the school had deceived students about the costs associated with doctoral studies and had engaged in what it saw as illegal telemarketing practices. At the time, the FTC put out a statement and it said that the university, its marketer, and its CEO deceptively advertised the cost and course requirements of its doctoral programs and its nonprofit status and made illegal calls to consumers. For the record, Grand Canyon University has always denied this and said that they did not do these things. One of the big issues was that they were claiming the doctoral program costs $10,000 to $12,000, I believe, more on average than what was being advertised because of courses and prerequisites that were needed to complete the program. And so that was sort of the basis of this. And it's a very complicated story because the claim essentially from Grand Canyon's side is that they were in a back and forth with the government, and the government started going after them once they started challenging the government. And now the government's claim is that, well, Grand Canyon University was being deceptive, and that's why we were going after them. So you had this back and forth, but regardless of the reason, what has happened now is the FTC has dropped this legal battle.
And so what has the FTC been saying here?
So the FTC's chairman, Andrew Ferguson, he joined the other commissioners, and they put out a statement, a joint statement, unanimously confirming this news that it had been dropped. This was on Friday. They said this case, which we inherited from the previous administration, was filed nearly 2 years ago and has suffered losses in 2 motions to dismiss. They went on to note the recent developments, obviously the Department of Education victory and some other victories that Grand Canyon has had. And they said, in its reduced form, this case presents consumers very little upside relative to the cost of pursuing it to completion. They said it would be imprudent to continue with this legal battle. And so they basically called it a lost cause. And citing their duty to taxpayers, the FTC said it decided to stop pursuing the case, thus leading to GCU's victory.
And what is GCU now saying?
So it's interesting because GCU, a lot of people, when they're in a battle like this, like their leaders will back down or they won't say anything publicly. But the president of GCU, we've had him on the show numerous times, Brian Mueller, he spoke out in a statement. He pushed back again on the allegations against the college. He said that he believes this is all a coordinated effort by former officials within the Biden administration to undermine what he called a thriving Christian university. He said, as we have stated from the beginning, not only were these accusations false, but the opposite is true. We go above and beyond what is required in our disclosures and are recognized as a leader in this area. He said, I want to read more of this because it's a very interesting statement. He
Yeah.
said, they threw everything they had at us for 4 years, and yet despite every unjust accusation leveled against us, we have not only survived, but have continued to thrive as a university. This is a testament, and he goes on to say it's a testament to the faculty, the staff, and others. But, they were not backing down from this battle. And again, it was multiple battles. It was a over $37 million fine from the Department of Education, which they won earlier this year when that was thrown out. And then this FTC lawsuit.
So, I mean, this is a story, obviously, as you mentioned here, that's been going on for a couple of years now. So what's the significance of this? Obviously, we have a new administration in, and so you're not seeing as many cases like this targeting Christians so blatantly like we did in the previous administration. So what's the significance here of this one?
Well, yeah, and one thing that we should know, and this is important, and it gets lost in this story, and I think because we lead with the truth, this battle, from what I understand, with the Department of Education started under the first Trump administration. It didn't actually, the education department part did not start with Biden. Now, the
Mm,
FTC piece of it did. The
yeah.
FTC was in 2023, but I do want to note that it seems like there was a legitimate dispute that was going on, and then it bubbled, and then it got worse. Right now, you have the FTC jumping in. It did seem like this was a targeting. And Brian Mueller has said in the past that he believes there was a targeting of them because they are a Christian university. And here's the other thing. I think I have this right. Grand Canyon University has not increased their tuition in, I believe, 15 years. They're so deceptive and awful, but they've intentionally not increased their tuition for a very long time. And that is something else that has gotten lost in this story. So there's so many details, and we're going to have a very big write-up today that people will be able to see on this that explains the whole history of it. But why is it significant? It's significant because if there is a targeting that has been going on, it needs to be remedied. And here's the deal. The FTC, in my view, is not going to back down from a case if they think they can win it. The Department of Education, and this is important, we spoke with the Department of Education. We got a statement from them earlier this year, and they essentially admitted that there was a targeting. In fact, they said, let me read you their statement. Unlike the previous administration, we will not persecute and prosecute colleges and universities based on their religious affiliation. This came from a spokesperson to us so it seems like there was some targeting, at least according to the Department of Education.
All right, because that fact about them not raising their tuition for 15 years at least, that compared to what other universities are doing now, I mean, if you look at the statistics, colleges and universities are raising their costs far above and beyond the typical rate of inflation. So people are like, I can't afford houses, and they're complaining and saying all the things like it's just look at the older generations, they can't understand what we're going through right now. And one of the things that they're going through, why can't we afford things now? It's not that just that they're so much more expensive. It's that kids are in so much more debt when they come out of college because the price of college has actually soared. And it's kind of crazy because they are almost pricing themselves out of being of value. Like if you're not going there to get a very specific high earning job, like a degree that is required for a high earning job, like a lawyer or something like that, I don't see how college is worth it. I really don't. I mean, unless you're getting a scholarship or you're getting some kind of discount or something of that nature, it's not going to pay off for you financially because you're going to come out with $200,000-$300,000 of debt, and then you're going to be making $40,000 a year. That just doesn't add up. I mean, you're better off just coming out and working a entry-level job and living at home for a couple of years and saving your money. You'll be in way better shape. And so the fact that all that to say, man, while the other colleges and universities are getting away with crazy price gouging, these guys aren't raising their prices or haven't in 15 years. And then they get targeted like this.
And final comment on this, that was one of the things that Brian Mueller had wondered, is because the way Grand Canyon is doing things, is it a threat to other universities and is it a threat to the system? Does it make it so you have the faith aspect of it, and then you have the fact that because and I just checked, it is 15 years, over 15 years, they have not increased tuition intentionally to help people with what you just described. So this is an important story. It's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And that is a good question. Is this the reason why they're being targeted? Because the rest of the people are saying, hey, we don't like this, making us look bad. Well, Good question to ask indeed. And I think a lot of people are asking it as well. Appreciate you bringing this one to the podcast today, Billy. All right, we are going to go over to the main thing now. And on Independence Day, man, we all saw the images of those devastating floods in Texas, and it left behind a trail of destruction that families are still dealing with weeks later. And the national spotlight obviously has shifted on that. The challenges still remain physical, emotional, financial. Well, joining Madison Seals is Megan Foley, Director of Emergency Disaster Services for the Salvation Army, to share how they're meeting those long-term needs and bringing hope to hurting communities.
We're now over a month past the catastrophic flooding in Kerrville, Texas, that claimed the lives of at least 136 people, including dozens of girls at Camp Mystic. Megan, what is the current situation on the ground there?
Yeah, the current situation, Madison, is that the community is still in a state of recovery and open response. There are still at least 2 people missing. And so we at the Salvation Army continue to pray for all affected and really want to make sure that the community is getting the resources that they need as they're dealing with the impacts of this devastating flood.
Yeah, and most people are familiar with the Salvation Army and the work that you do, not only in providing physical aid and relief to families of victims and first responders, but you also have trained staff providing spiritual and emotional help too. So can you talk about what that looks like practically?
Absolutely. And that's been a major part of our response to Texas just because of the tragic nature of this incident. When people see the red shield of the Salvation Army, they immediately think about those physical needs that we provide, like food and shelter, and how we physically nourish survivors of disaster. And here in Texas, we really are seeing the need for this unique service that we can provide, this unique ministry that we can provide in emotional and spiritual care. In the past month, we have touched over 2,600 people through our emotional and spiritual care chaplains. And these are folks, mostly volunteers, who go through robust training in order to provide prayer, listening, and encouragement to all of those affected by disaster. And that's not only the survivors of a disaster, it's also the first responders who are conducting search and rescue operations, specifically at this incident, the Central Texas floods. These are folks who are running towards danger and are working long hours in really horrific conditions to bring peace to the survivors in these communities.
Yeah, and that's so important because in the wake of a natural disaster or a tragedy of some sort, it's kind of all over the headlines, and people are volunteering and coming out in large numbers to participate in relief efforts, which is incredible. And naturally, those efforts seem to die down after a while. People have to go back to work. There's another natural disaster or something else going on in the world that attention is shifted towards. And yet, like you were saying at the start of this, that there's still just this path of destruction that's left behind and people who are hurting and still looking for family members. So how is the Salvation Army preparing to help with those more long-term recovery efforts?
Great question, Madison. And I'd like to start at the beginning with this question because the power of the Salvation Army is that we were already in Kerrville before the floods happened. So we have a strong community presence already across the United States. And so when disaster happens, we already know our neighbors. We know who the most vulnerable are. We know who's going to need the most help. And so that knowledge and that trust in a community really helps us stay alongside them as they recover and still be there during long-term recovery because we know how to focus the resources and get to the ones who are going to need the most help.
And what does that look like when there's other emergencies or natural disasters that pop up? I know you said you already had people stationed kind of in the Kerrville area that know their neighbors. So are some of those resources reallocated, or how do you guys deal with that?
So that local model really helps us meet the capacity of several communities at the same time. The local Kerrville Croc Center was there the morning after the floods serving first responders, serving survivors of the floods. And then as that incident becomes more complicated, grows in size, et cetera, we know that we have other resources that we can bring in from, say, our division, or then even our larger territories can bring resources into that community. Disaster is also what we call scalable. And so as the incident progresses, the needs will change, and how much of a certain resource will change. And so then we can make sure that the Kerrville community, for example, has what it needs. And then if there's another incident in another part of Texas or another part in the Southern Territory, if they need to ramp up and start preparing for a hurricane, for example, we're right in the throes of hurricane season and watching Tropical Storm Erin currently, then we can move those resources accordingly. And that local model ensures that we're not taking away from people who need our help, that we're always in the community and getting people what they need.
And that local model is also so unique and important in that people are often so vulnerable after something like this. Of course, they would be. A lot of people have lost their homes, they've lost family members. And while they're desperate for help in some ways, especially physical help and like immediate aid, trying to open up emotionally or get emotional or spiritual help can be difficult, I imagine, after something like that. And so the fact that your people know some of these people in this community already and have built some relationships, that has to be hugely impactful in reaching people.
Right, exactly. We are going to people on the worst day of their lives. And we're standing alongside first responders who also live in these communities and whose families also may be impacted. And it's the worst day of their life, too, even though they're going to work. And so being in community before disaster happens really gives the Salvation Army an edge and a strength to the services that we provide.
And as someone who is overseeing a lot of this physical and spiritual aid work, what would you say is the biggest need and prayer that people can be lifting up at the moment?
The biggest prayer is that the community of Kerrville wakes up every morning and knows that people are thinking of them and praying for them, and that they know that people are praying for them to be resilient and that the day is going to get better. The best way to support Kerrville and the surrounding communities today is to provide financial donations. Every single dollar from the public means something to a disaster survivor. And 100% of our disaster donations go directly to that disaster. So donors can know that their money is going to a good cause, being put in the right place. And that money gives us the flexibility we need to purchase and provide the services that people need as the needs change during a disaster. So at first, the residents of Kerrville needed cleanup kits and they needed food. Now they're going to need more help rebuilding and are going to need different supplies. And so instead of sending all of the stuff, by the time the cleanup kit gets there, we're not going to need it anymore. And so it really benefits us when people can send along a check or give online. And you can do that at helpsalvationarmy.org. And no donation is too small, and no prayer will go unanswered or unheard, really.
All right, Madison, appreciate that story there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
I love this one. It's Proverbs 28:1. The wicked flee, though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. And it just made me think of GCU and others who kind of stand up when it's not convenient or easy, and they just do it because it's the right thing to do. So I love that scripture.
Amen. Amen. We definitely need to be praying for people of faith and institutions of faith that stand up and do the right thing. We need to be praying for them as they go about this and, fight the powers that be that are trying to push them back. Well, as always, get on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. We'll see you then.